This week in my little series on understanding payment processing statements, I want to talk to you about flat rate with surcharges. Now, this is probably my favorite pricing structure to go against, all right, because it's usually a really bad deal for the merchant, and it's also one where the merchant generally feels very much ripped off when you show them what they're actually paying. So let me break down how this works. Usually what will happen is a payment processing person will come in and talk to a business owner and say, hey, you know what? Whatever it is that you process right now, I'm going to give you flat rate pricing at 1.3%. Something like that. And the merchant's like, that sounds pretty good. I think I'm paying a lot more than that right now, which they are. So they're like, okay, cool. So they sign and they're like, yeah, see right here it says 1.3%. Here's what they don't show. They don't show in the fine print where it says, if a card doesn't qualify for that rate, we're going to add a surcharge that is somehow related to the underlying cost of the transaction, right? And so they don't show any of that to the merchant. The merchant just signs it. And then when you go in to talk to the merchant, and you're like, hey, I want to work with you. They're like, oh, I have a great deal. I get 1.3% flat rate. And you're thinking to yourself, no, you don't. Like, the processor's not losing money on your account. You know what I mean? Because the average cost of running a transaction is like 2%. So that doesn't make any sense. So you're like, hey, let me take a look at a statement. And I guarantee you, you're not paying 1.3%. Now, sometimes they'll say, well, I'm not showing you a statement. I'm paying 1.3%. If you don't believe me, that's your problem. That's where I say, okay, well, do me a favor then. Let's just really quickly, just rough estimate here, okay? Just rough estimate. Let's make sure that let's keep them honest. And I will walk out the door right now if it ends up being 1.3%. Are you ready? I don't even need to see a statement. Do you know roughly how much credit card processing volume you did last month? Just give me a 10,000, 20,000, 30,000, like rough estimate. And they're like 30,000. You're like, okay, cool. Do you know roughly how much you paid in credit card processing fees? Like, what was the actual money that was pulled out of your account to cover the cost of payment processing? And they're like, $900. And I'm like, okay, 900 divided by 30,000 is 3%. And then they're like, wait, what? Oh, I'm not paying 1.3%, right? So you can do that, right? So then you get a copy of the statement, right? Well, guess what that statement's going to have? That statement's going to have something that's very confusing. It is a surcharge table. Now, that's become a very loaded term lately because we now have the idea of compliant surcharging. This has nothing to do with that. This is a surcharge table, which means surcharge just means adding something on. And in this context, it means for these transactions, we added a fee. Now, the interesting thing is this table is going to look like an interchange table, and it usually has some relation to that because it'll have interchange categories. But there's two big differences with a surcharge table versus an interchange table. With a surcharge table, number one, they're usually not going to have all the transactions on there. So for instance, regulated debit's not going to be on there usually. Regular credit cards are not going to be on there. In other words, think of it like when we talk about maybe a tiered pricing, you would think of it like qualified transactions. Like these are the transactions that actually qualified for this flat rate of 1.3% or 1.5% or whatever they were promised, right? So they're not on this surcharge table. That's the first key, but that's very hard to tell when you just look at it. I'll explain that in a minute. The second thing that you can tell is that the rates are actually going to be lower than the true cost of interchange, which would be like, well, that doesn't make any sense. What is this, like reverse markup or something? Like, how are they charging less than the cost of interchange? Well, the way they're doing that is they're charging that 1.3 or 1.5%, usually up in the top in like a discount table or something. And then in this surcharge table, well, this is what they're adding on to the 1.3%, right? So maybe we have a card where the interchange is, let's say, 1.7% and 10 cents, okay? And the merchant's paying flat 1.5%, right? Well, this transaction is 1.7. So this company might come in and they might say, well, we're going to put this one on the interchange table and we're going to charge an additional 1.5% and 10 cents. And you're like, well, wait a minute, the interchange is 1.7. How are they charging 1.5 and 10? Because they're actually charging 3% and 10 cents, right? It's that 1.5% surcharge that's been added on top of the 1.5% flat rate fee, okay? So flat rate with surcharges, they're adding on something to a flat rate. Now, again, this is actually a very common pricing structure, and it's very confusing when you look at it because, again, that interchange table doesn't seem to make any sense because it's not an interchange table, right? Good news for you. Our sponsor, ISOAMP. We know how to deal with these. We do them instantly, automatically. Give us a good scan of most of these statements. It's going to come back either instantly or within a few minutes because these are easy for us. We are able to automatically identify that that's what this is. So guess what? We call that interchange table what it is, which is it's a volume fee. It's not an interchange item. It's a volume fee, right? So that's great. We have that. But guess what? We can also pull data from that surcharge table if we need to understand things like debit and credit and things of that nature that we might need for you to convert them to another form of pricing. So our system automatically grabs all of that data in an extremely intelligent way, categorizes it correctly, and then puts it on the proposal tool for you so that when you go in and select your pricing structure, well, it's going to be side by side the way it should be, or it's not side by side because you're doing a totally different pricing structure. But either way, we're going to show it to the merchant in a way where it makes sense to them and they very clearly can see they're not paying that 1.3% flat rate that they thought they were paying, and they can clearly see that if they go with you, they're going to save money. So head over to getisoamp.com, check it out, or click the link below this video, get a free demo, and see how our solution can work for you on these complicated statements. My name is James Shepard. Have a great day.